Good evening, everyone, and welcome from me, Ian Craig. This is the monthly webinar series for CISN. We're now past halfway through the year. It seems to have flown by now. And tonight we've got Matt Lovell. Matt I've known for several years, and I've always known him to have a huge interest in ergogenic strategies because he's worked a lot with elite sports people. In the past, when I knew him originally, he was doing a lot of work in the sports team space. He's also done an awful lot of individual elite sports work and a lot of recreational level as well. He's now doing a lot of corporate work, so a bit of a change for him, but he's always retained his sporting identity all the way through. Matt's also the owner of a supplement company called Amino Man. So within his interest, he's always understood a lot about nutrients that can be used, A, to support health, but secondly, to support performance. And he's got a similar background to me in that he comes from nutritional therapy, meaning that, you know, health is really, really important. So he aligns really nicely with that concept. And within tonight's presentation, he'll go through the health support and not just, you know, the sexy things like creatine and caffeines and that sort of thing that we tend to associate with ergogenic strategies. So I'm really looking forward to this one. He's going to work organically. So it's not a set presentation like some people prefer to do. So we heavily value your questions. So please don't just sit back with your video off and listen. Get involved in the chat. If there's anything you want to learn, please throw that out up front. If there's anything that he's saying that's stimulating some thoughts for you, throw in a question as well. We'll do the standard format of 40-45 minutes of presentation base, but as I said, I'll be throwing out questions to him based on what you've asked. But then we'll finish with a more formal Q&A at the end. So with that, Matt, welcome, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on to do the webinar this evening. Good evening, everyone. Do keep the questions coming. Otherwise, I've got plenty of things that I can talk through if people prefer to be a little bit quiet. So yeah, so my name's Matt. I've been working in this field for, I think it's 23 years now. Originally began in sort of 1999 and spent quite a while on Harley Street, sort of cutting my cloth, seeing all kinds of sports people, but all kinds of health related conditions as well. And I suppose as a practitioner, you evolve and you build systems. Once you hit on little protocols that are very effective, and you find that they work time and time again. But you can't do them all at once. So really, to benefit your clients best, you have to prioritize their best needs and go to the thing, the 80-20% rule, I sometimes call it. It's the small thing which is going to get you the biggest amount of results with that particular client. So, you know, they might come to you and they might present with poor sleep, with burnout, with overtraining syndrome, with maybe some digestive disorders. They'll also come with a whole heap of body composition targets, lean muscle mass targets, power to weight ratio targets. So in your initial interview, you're sort of absorbing all that information, and then in your sort of nutritional mind, prioritizing the thing that's going to give them the most benefit. And I do really love the powerful effects that nutrition can have on body composition and fat loss. So I've worked with sports. I've also worked with quite a few actors. This is actually an actor, and now a friend of mine. He's actually my main training partner. We're training legs tomorrow morning, and we did a bit of work ahead of one of his films to get him in tip-top condition. So you can see the protocol is highly simplified on the right. And this evening's talk is going to be very practical. I'm not going to go into theory of why I might choose something. I'm just going to tell you what I do and how it works. So he was quite lean when he started. He was about 84 kg at about 12% body fat. And at the end of the program, he dropped a couple of kg, but went down to 5% body fat. So he lost a lot of fat, but he also gained a lot of muscle during that cycle. The phases that we use for him will come on into a moment, and I'll dig into detail, but the overview was time restricted feeding approach. Obviously calorie and energy balance is key to these types of transformation. In order to lose the weight, he's got to be in a deficit. In order to gain the muscle, he's got to be in a positive nitrogen balance from consuming enough protein. And then you got to do your best to keep your clients as absolutely as healthy as possible. So I'd say almost everyone I see has a really detailed screening profile done, bloods wise, sometimes hormones, stool tests sometimes, but so you're gathering as much data as you can, and you're fixing as many insufficiencies, deficiencies, and getting them into the best possible health state as a priority. Back in the day, also looked after other couple of actors, Angelina Jolie, Wolverine for Wolverine 1, and then as Ian said, loads of teams. So I've had a chance to, in a way, is refine these protocols. So hopefully what you're getting this evening is some really practical and effective protocol. So in the introduction around the talk tonight, it was around kind of establishing functional medicine or functional nutrition protocol within a elite performance type of realm. So you'll know, if you've looked at this area, that there's systems in the body, hormonal system, endocrine system, circulation and cardiovascular system. You've got oxygen delivery, mitochondrial energy production considerations, health around digestion, absorption. Actually looking a lot into that gut-brain axis this morning for another client, and that's a really powerful emerging area. And you've also got your bread and butter stuff. You can talk for an hour just on the hydration, and actually getting these fundamentals in place would be in the first phases of their nutritional coaching. So hydration strategies, getting the macronutrient balance. I work off a body weight multiplier, so I base everything off a 2-1-1 according to your desired lean weight. So if you want to lose weight, you go for your desired lean weight at a lower body weight. If you want to gain weight, you go for your desired lean weight at a higher body weight. 2 grams of protein, 1 gram of carb, 1 gram of fat, and I'll derive that from primarily vegetables, good fats, and quality sources of protein, depending on preference, and also intolerances, etc. And then the bit which makes the difference is you have a sliding scale around carbohydrate intake and timing of carbs around periods of high activity. And then you also would drop the fat down. The higher the carbs go up, the more you drop the fat down to also allow for sensible calories, but also noting that high fat and high carbs is generally not a good mix for optimizing someone's body composition outside of a sort of endurance type event anyway. So looking at all those systems would then be thinking, how can we optimize health? And then just a simple diagram here around moderating inflammation, moderating oxidative stress, and ultimately what we hope then is we reduce the likelihood of illness, disease onset, because we're putting in place all the nutrients we know which are protective for the body. So when I began all this, I wrote a load of nutritional cycles. I'll be happy afterwards to share any of these slides and the regenerate system, which I sort of umbrella named these phases under something I called the regenerate system. And what I began to see is that I was working in nutritional cycles. So you'd have a consultation, you do the cleanup, you'd look at the macronutrients, you look at the hydration, you'd establish a healthy eating pattern, and you'd look at optimizing the workout nutrition. So pre-workout, intra-workout, post-workout. And actually the initial emphasis was on things like whey protein. It was on refined carbs plus whey protein post-exercise. And it did use a few of the bread and butter nutrients that we'll come on to in a moment. Things like creatine, which is a fantastically beneficial ergogenic and actually increasingly a health supplement as well now, because of its protective effects on cognition, brain function, anti and concussive effects, and general regeneration effect on the cells. So
Matt,
yeah,
can I throw in a couple of quick questions?
Of course you can.
So Maeve, this might not be for now, but she's interested at some point in your talk in which reference ranges you use, I presume in terms of macronutrients, rather than the silly reference ranges, as she said. And Paul wanted to know how you measured body fat in your acting friend.
Yeah.
He thinks 5% is pretty low.
It is low. 4% is the lowest I've ever measured in an elite boxer. Most of my footballers were 8 to 10%. The answer to that question is multiple methods. So caliper, foresight caliper test, bioimpedance, and then the tape measure, and then photos. So multiple methods. Sometimes you see skin folds come down by 10 mil and the scales won't show any change at all. So I think it's important to have multiple methods. He also water loaded for that photo shoot. So that will take additional fluid from under the skin. So that's a technique that fighters will use to make weight, but also if you want to have that really dry, papery look to the skin, then water loading can really help. And some of the cell volumizing protocols that I'll come on to in a minute. So I'll mention one now, glycerol. Glycerol is a hyperhydration agent, so it will take water out, extracellular water into the muscle. So again, it dries things out. It can actually dehydrate people if you use it in the wrong way. So you have to be careful with it and not use too much. But the timing of that can really help either hyperhydration and or that nice, the look you saw. Yeah, 5%, as I measured him on a foresight caliper test. I think the foresight caliper test might be quite generous on body fat, but there you go. It's just a number. Depending on the algorithm, you'll get different body fats from different methods. The main thing is he looked good and he was ready for his shoot. And then the macronutrients, in terms of the macronutrients, well, if you take your lean weight and you do 2 grams of protein per kilo, 1 gram of fat, 1 gram of carb, what you get calories wise is your basal metabolic rate. It's almost exactly the basal metabolic rate equation, but it's just on 211. And I find that's a very effective day-to-day calorie load for most people who are relatively inactive outside of a single sort of quality workout. But as I said, the carbs will slide up the more someone does it activity-wise. So if someone wants to stay the same weight, what I'll do is calorie match the estimated calorie burn from the session with pre, intra, and post-workout calories from carbs, aminos, and protein. So they basically, when they do more, they eat more. And I found that's very effective for keeping people lean and also making sure they don't get overtired. Because if you're eating a basal metabolic rate and training hard, ultimately that won't be sustainable. The the 2 grams of protein per kilo is the upper end of what I would use, and that is basically the more fat someone needs to use, that will go up towards 2 or maybe 2.2 grams per kilo. When fat loss is less of a priority, I'll stabilize around about 1.6, and then if it's kind of recreational Joe Blogs, that might drift down a bit to 1.2. But I certainly wouldn't go lower than 1.2 for most of my clients. I do actually believe, I know there's controversy around almost every area in nutrition, but I am very big on matching vegetables with the protein. So whether you believe in acid alkaline balance and the effects or not, what we do know is that vegetables from all sources, herbs, spices, are generally associated with reduction in all-cause mortality. So the more you can eat from the plant-based kingdom, then generally the healthier you should be. And particularly if you are eating the upper end of that protein intake at around 2 grams per kilo, I think it is important to balance it with enough vegetables. So what I'll do is I'll go through the phases now, because I think you might be thinking, well, what are these phases then?
Matt,
yeah.
Again, at some point, can you say more about the water loading technique? Another Paul has asked about that one.
I can just send you the protocol, but I think it's good to answer things as they come up. Effectively, what you do is you consume a lot of water without any salt for a number of days. The protocols can vary. Then you consume, apologies. You consume a lot of water with a lot of salt for a period of a few days, up to a week. Then you consume not very much water with no salt at all. And then you take your hyperhydration nutrients and effectively you semi-dehydrate, ready for, if it's a photo shoot, you semi-dehydrate, or if you're making weight, you would also be semi-dehydrated. So what effectively you get is a water flushing effect. So sodium holds water in the body. When you take away the sodium and take away the water, the fact that you're going from maybe 8 liters down to 2 liters, all that you just excrete tons of water very, very quickly. That's in a sort of simplified way. So these are the phases. Phase 1 is I've called it protein synthesis. So in terms of ergogenics, that would be leaning a bit potentially on supplemental protein sources, so you can make the 2 grams per kilo. So your whey proteins, your plant proteins, or your amino acids to hit your protein grams. Leucine is going to be vital in this situation because it switches on muscle protein synthesis. So you could get a straight leucine or use BCAAs with EAAs as a kind of mix. I found older athletes and some individuals might need some digestive support. So some digestive enzymes, perhaps around a larger protein feed. And then you agree on a time period where they can consume those calories, build the meals, and work on the recipes and keeping everything nice and healthy. That particular phase, what I did is I married up a training system to each phase. So with the protein synthesis phase, the hypertrophy emphasis was on mechanical stress. So that's basically lifting heavy weights under control and causing damage to the eccentric phase of the exercise. And so it's a strength phase. It's basically a strength phase. And they're working hard. They're working hard. They're going to be aching. Remembering that you would have, prior to this phase, you would have fixed omega-3 to 6 ratio, vitamin D deficiency, looking at building everything on the back of an anti-inflammatory diet. So you're supporting these processes. When we reduce inflammation around exercise via these type of things, it's shown to increase protein synthesis, particularly as we get older. That was the initial phase, and after a couple of years, what I did is I did a pre protein synthesis phase, which I called an insulin sensitizing phase. Effectively, what that was a calorie restricted phase plus glucose sensitizing nutrients, because what you get when you underfeed and then overfeed is you get a phenomenon known as an anabolic rebound. And this is something that you may have read about if you into bodybuilding, but lots of bodybuilders will mention that they're in their best shape 2 or 3 days after the show, because they've leaned down so much, restricted their calories so much to get ultra low levels of body fat. And then when they resume eating and they have more carbs and salt and things, the cells swell up. And that leads us on to the second phase, which is the cell volume theory of hypertrophy. So effectively, if you increase the amount of nutrients in the cell, you put the cell in a more conducive position to create muscle, as long as you have the right stimulus. And if we think about cell volumizing nutrients, well, this is when we start thinking about anything that's stored in the muscle, which is stored with water. So carbohydrates obvious, creatine is probably the second most obvious, but there's other cell volumizing aminos such as glycine, taurine, which all can help with this process. And then you've got the glycerol, which is quite a powerful cell volumizing nutrient. So what you would then do is put these all into some pre, intra, and post-workout drinks, and then the training system that goes with the cell volume is basically loaded stretching. So there's a stretch-aided theory of muscle growth, which ties in with the cell volume. If you have high volume of substrates in the muscle cell, then you use stretch-aided hypertrophy. This is another powerful signal to gain muscle. And the training techniques, are quite brutal actually, because you're working the muscle through the full range of motion. Be looking at when you're building the programs, you'll be looking at something called positions of flexion, which is choosing 3 movements. One is a mid-range, one is a peak contraction, and one is a stretch loaded effect. There's pulses, so you stretch under load at the end of the range of motion, and then you can also do some high intensity sort of muscle contractions at the end of sets. So that's one of the ways I think this helps clients is you can run the phases for as long as you want. I mean, you could do it for 4 weeks, for 6 weeks, but then to prevent people getting stale, then you've got a new phase with a new series of muscle stimulating ergogenics that you can put in after that. Phase 3, and I would say, is in your initial interviewing process, you might jump straight to phase 3 if someone's complaining about sleep. You might jump straight to phase 4 if you've got an immune challenged or an athlete who has a tendency to be injury prone. You might, if you've done some hormonal work and they've got low testosterone, or you're working with a female athlete who needs hormonal support and hormonal balancing, then you may jump to phase 5. And then if you're sensing burnout, or they're working on some cognitive sport, you might go straight for neurotransmitters workout. So you can prioritize the phases, in other words. So phase 3 is all about sleep. So hopefully they're using wearable, you've got some sleep data, and they'll be looking at all the different types of things, of which there are many, which can help deeper, more restful sleep. And this phase is where I'll be looking at secretagogue aminos, so ornithine, alpha-ketoglutarate, glutamine, arginine, all the things which basically put you into a deeper, more restful sleep, and also actually help with muscle protein synthesis while you sleep. If you can maximize that recovery phase while you're asleep, you've got 8 hours of sort of free recovery. So it's really important. Sometimes I'll also use antioxidants or antioxidant-rich foods at that point, and sometimes also fish oils and other anti-inflammatory recovery nutrients. Curcumin might creep into that nighttime support phase. We are mainly concentrating on foods and nutrients, but obviously sleep hygiene, the lifestyle stuff ties in with all this. So you'd be also coaching them on that. Phase 4, all about immune system function. So what happens when you support a better immune system function is people tend to gain muscle faster. Sometimes you see that. Originally, I noted that anecdotally, I had someone take over a period of a month 1 kilo of lactoferrin, which is it's a bioactive protein, what's called a bioactive protein. It's one of the bioactive components from whey protein. Colostrum is also bioactive protein. But the lactoferrin was obviously a very powerful signal. He gained over 1 kilo of lean mass in a month. So that is, in my opinion, a very effective way to support recovery, is to support an optimum functioning immune system. Obviously, in this day and age, we need a very healthy immune system response. So bioactive proteins, all your immune boosting nutrients. Tissue quality wise, we're looking at collagen supplementation alongside bioflavonoids, and then a few maybe nutrients that some people might find effective, cisus, things like that, which can potentially increase tissue quality. Phase 5 is I sort of tied that in. It's an adrenal phase. It's a testosterone phase. It's a cortisol phase. So it's basically bringing in adaptogens, so adaptogenic herbal complexes, in order to positively affect cortisol and testosterone ratio, which is an important part of recovery. Lots of different things out there. Some of them don't work. Some of them are really, really powerful. Horny goatweed's a good one. Tonkat Ali. You get short-term effects from all of the herbs which stimulate luteinizing hormones. So they work for a couple of weeks and they stop working. So then you have to take a couple of weeks off and then go back on them afterwards. And then neurotransmitters would be around brain support, effectively. So the category of supplementation there would be natural nootropics, of which there are many, but moving away from any routine use of stimulant-based pre-workouts, which I think are an absolute nightmare. So non-stimulant pre-workouts. So probably one of the best single nutrients you can use in this sphere is tyrosine. But there's lots of different nutrients, choline, analogues, other herbs, bacopa, pine bark extract even, which will all tie into that brain health realm on the back of good supplementation with essential fats. Just trying to find my cursor. So yeah, so any questions based on that so far?
We've got a few, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Neve was asking about percentage omega-3s that you'd mentioned you got right in the pre-phase section of this work. What were you referring to? What percentage omega-3s are you looking to get people to, was her question?
Okay. I'm assuming that means the ratio, omega-3 to 6 ratio. So which is my go-to test for omega-3 status. I mean, it's hard to get a 2-to-1 ratio. If you know anyone that's had that test done, it's rare to see that. But that is.
Who do you test with?
I used TDL, the Doctor's Laboratory, Central London. I think they send it all to Stirling for testing.
Okay.
University of Stirling. I think they do most of the omega-3 testing in the UK actually. But you'll basically get for anyone that isn't aware of what that means, you get a ratio. So it's an omega-3 to 6 ratio. The average ratio in the UK, depending on what you read, is 20 to 1 or 25 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3s. So obviously that means that most people are taking way too many omega-6s in relation to omega-3 fats. And the reason that's important is because when you take a lot of those types of fats, it can over spill into pathways which produce pro-inflammatory chemicals and hormones in the body if you have too much omega-6. On the flip side, you've got your omega-3. So when you get your ratio, the lab will also send through some recommendations on how much omega-3 you should take, and they normally recommend it as EPA. So mostly, if someone's over 20 to 1, they might be recommended 4 grams of EPA a day. So you read the back of the fish oil supplement and take the appropriate amount of tablets. I think it's very important to use EPA and DHA. They occur naturally in fish. There's no point in taking EPA on its own, in my opinion. I think it might cause an imbalance with DHA, and that wouldn't be good. So normally a fish oil would be a 2-to-1 ratio of EPA to DHA. I personally take 2,000 milligrams EPA and 1,000 DHA most days, and if I'm injured or aching a lot, I might triple that dose. But you can sort of go up and down, and that's on the back of eating quite a lot of oily fish as well.
This is a question from me. If that ratio is quite out of balance, do you try and get people consuming fewer nuts and seeds? Because you obviously get the unhealthy omega-6s through the processed food, but you'll get health-orientated people eating lots of nuts and seeds.
It's true. Omega-6 basically has 2 camps. One is not very good and one is probably very good. And for that reason, sometimes vegetarians have a very poor ratio, even though they're eating a very healthy diet, but it is a little bit deficient omega-3. My personal approach is actually, if they're eating a lot of nuts and seeds, I might moderate a little bit, but mostly I just put the 3s in. Because I think from the available research, just putting the 3s in gets you most of the benefits. If they're eating a lot of fried foods, that kind of thing, then you would be looking at getting all the highly heated vegetable oils out of the diet.
Yeah, in the bin.
In the bin. It's one of my bugbears. I think probably that's one of the main ways people become unhealthy is by rancid, oxidized, highly heated vegetable oil with long life. So they put chemical preservatives in the oil to give it a long life. So probably that's why the body finds it so hard to process them, because it comes with a high dose of additives and preservatives.
So what omega-6 to 3 ratio do you like to see?
Certainly under 5 to 1.
Okay.
I mean, if you can get someone down to 2 to 1. But look, if someone's under 10, they're doing quite well. Mediterranean footballers who eat their veg, like the fish, they would be 7, 8 on average. So that's already quite good. And if you stick them on a few fish oils, they get below 5.
Yeah, okay. Okay, a question from Judy. How much vegan protein would you consume, such as hemp, to meet the same levels as something like whey? And would you mix it with the rice protein to try and get the complementary amino acid ratios?
The vegan protein that I prefer would be enhanced with branched chain amino acids so that it has sufficient leucine to trigger mTOR, which whey protein naturally has high levels of leucine in anyway, as does most milk protein. So yeah, so I'd use a vegan BCAA, either pre-mixed into it or alongside a vegan hemp or rice or pea protein. That's probably the most effective way.
Okay, you got 2 more questions and then you can go on.
Cool.
From Aisha, any suggestions for clients wanting to lose weight who are new mothers for sleep strategies?
New mothers. Oh, the hardest thing about having children is this sleep deprivation. I mean, my best bit of advice is look at general things which don't make you too sleepy, because you're probably going to have to wake up to feed. And actually, if you're in a really deep sleep, that becomes really difficult. Sleep when you can. So if the baby sleeps, don't go to sleep. Just, sleep when you can. Do siestas and just take it easy. Don't try and do the same training that you did before. Don't be kind to yourself. Just do what you can. And that first phase of sleep, they'll normally settle down within 6 months, and then you think you're okay, and then they start teething, and then you go through another phase. But then after a year or so, then you can probably get into a proper sleep routine. And good luck with that.
Yeah, good question. So self-compassion.
Yeah, self-compassion, definitely.
Maeve asks, how long is each phase, and are there deloads amidst all of it? Right.
So the fastest you want to do each of these phases would be 2 weeks each, and that is going quite quickly. So that would take you, those phases would be 3 months, 2 weeks to run with the insulin sensitizing phase. But actually, if someone's happy in a phase, I'll extend it to a month. So that whole phase could last 6.5 months. When you begin one phase, it lasts for all the other phases. So phase 1 will last for the whole duration of the plan, and so on. So you do end up being on quite a complicated and detailed support. I mean, it's designed for maximizing performance in elite teams, so it is maybe more than most recreational people want to do, but you don't have to take everything recommended in each phase. You could just use one thing for each phase, and that way you'd only be on 5 or 6 supplements by the end of the period. You then need a washout phase of 2 to 4 weeks where you down regulate and come off most things that aren't health related. So come off all the ergogenic, pure ergogenics, direct ergogenics. And also during that washout phase, I often recommend a low protein phase. So I take someone's protein right down over 10 days and then keep it down for a couple of weeks. And I found that's also effective when you put them back on the protein. It seems to have a very good effect. Plus, it's always good to give the body a rest from doing the same thing for too long. There are there are other phases. So when you start going into this, you've got phases around competition. You've got phases which might be suited to endurance and ultra endurance. You've got your older athlete or your anti-aging support. And what I then, after I built these phases, I'm just trying to find my cursor. What I did then is if you decide to do this, the first time you do it would be good just to go through the phases as they're listed there. Then the second time you do it, what you could do is you can actually make it more specific to a body type. And the body type is based not on anything which is, maybe questionable science, i.e. metabolic typing. It's based on your lean mass targets, and also whether you need to gain weight, lose weight, and what degree of insulin resistance you might have. So I established 3 rough body types with goals and traits. The classic one you get in the muscle building arena is someone who's quite skinny that finds it really, really difficult to put on any lean mass. They tend to be lean, although not always. They can be skinny fat, so under muscle but underweight. Then the mixed type would be someone who doesn't need to lose any weight or gain any weight. They're in the middle. They've got no insulin resistance. And then you've got someone who might be sort of out of shape and got poor blood sugar control and maybe the beginnings of some insulin resistance. The insulin resistance is measured via fasting insulin, fasting glucose, and something called HbA1c. So you can build from those numbers, you can build a functional insulin resistance index. You can also pump the numbers into a HOMA calculator. Excuse me. Throat suddenly dried up. The HOMA calculator is really handy because it gives the degree of insulin resistance that someone might have. Excuse me, I might just go and drink a bit of water just quickly. I'll be 2 ticks.
Yeah, on you go. Okay, so continue to fire through questions, guys.
Sorry about that. It's literally a frog in my throat. So yeah, HOMA calculator is really handy actually, because you can get apparently healthy and young people who are actually getting a degree of insulin resistance, which won't show up through HbA1c. HbA1c is a marker of the average level of sugar in the blood, and that will only rise really when the pancreas is starting to burn out. So with that particular person, they would go on to a different macronutrient split. So by differentiating between the different body types and goals will then dictate where you go first with your macronutrient split. And then I recategorized and reprioritized the phases to fit the body type and the goals and the traits. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of those things. So the hard gainer, you've got the physical traits. I would actually, even with the hard gainer, is to do the insulin sensitizing phase, because they will potentially really benefit from the anabolic rebound, which is where you take them from calorie maintenance to calorie surplus. They also, because when people get results quickly within the first couple of weeks of you looking after them, the adherence has always been shown to be greater, because if you can show someone that they can achieve something and they get results in that period of time, they're far more likely to stick with the program and also stick with you. So the hard gainer would start an insulin sensitizing phase plus the cell volume phase. So they jump to phase 2. Then their phase 1 would be around growth hormone, and they'd start to combine 2 phases at once, basically. Does that make sense? So they'd start with the 14-day insulin sensitizing phase, plus cell volume nutrients, creatine, glycerol, etc. And once you'd run that phase for say a month, you'd start them on phase 3 and phase 1. So they'd start on protein synthesis plus phase 3. so that you're sort of fast tracking them so they get better results quickly. The mixed type would start with the 14-day sensitizer plus the cell volume, and then they go to phase 3. So similar to the hard gainer, but with a lower carbohydrate intake. And then the insulin resistant type would go on the 14-day insulin sensitizing, plus you work on the growth hormone and sleep in the first phase. Then phase 1 would be straight into cell volume. So what I've done as well is that, you know, you'll dig through these slides when you get them, obviously. I appreciate there's a lot of information in the slides, but if you just read through it steadily, you'll find that it's not as complicated as it might appear on first pass. So what I did then was look at how I was going to get the simplest method to get the most amount of nutrients into someone in each phase. So what I've done is I've also broken that down into the individual nutrients which might be used in each particular phase. So if you want to, you could order and blend your own mix of aminos which would have the desired effect around helping blood sugar control in this example. You've got phase 2 loading nutrients which you could put together yourself. COL is short for colostrum. The anabolic rebound phase, I've given you doses of essential aminos, leucine and BCAAs that you could source yourselves and then sandwich these types of nutrient around a particular workout. I'm just looking at the time there, Ian. Do you want to? Should we shift into some more questions?
I've got 2 additional questions from what you've answered. Any benefits of using rice bran compared to other oils? That was from Judy.
Rice bran oil. I mean that I've not used that.
Yeah, me neither. So maybe Judy, you can elaborate a wee bit on that one. And then we've asked, how low protein do you go in the post washout phase, which was at the end of your phases?
So that, in answer to that would be zero what you might call grade A sources of protein. So no animal proteins, no milk proteins, no plant, no supplemental sources of protein, no tofu. So you only get the protein that is derived from grains and vegetables. So ultimately, it is quite a low protein diet.
Do you have legumes in it?
A few legumes, yeah.
Okay, just not tofu.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Apart from that, we're good.
All right. Well, I'm almost at the end of this little block of slides on the Regenerate system. So what I can do is end the show, and then does anyone want me to delve into any other areas based on what I've discussed so far?
Okay, so yeah, as I said earlier, Matt wants to do this quite interactively. So we've got another 10 minutes or so of the webinar. Just fire through any questions you want him to develop more, or any other areas that he hasn't gone into yet. So are you done with that bit now, Matt?
Yeah, but I'm just
Okay.
dipping out. I'm dipping out into another presentation which might bring to life some of the protocols and systems I was just speaking about.
Okay. Right, good. Judy's asked about the rice bran. She said rice bran extracts are used to support digestion. I haven't looked at the ratio of omega oils, so.
I mean, it'll be primarily omega-6. I am guessing, because I've not used rice bran oil, but most vegetable oils are primarily omega-6. Rapeseed oil has a better omega-3 to 6 ratio, but unless it's organic, cold pressed, locally sourced, it can also not be that great. There's a lot of GMO rapeseed oil or canola oil in America, and rapeseed oil makes up 1/3 of all commercially available vegetable oils. So whilst it does have a better omega-3 profile, you just have to be very careful about where you source it. This slide shows some of the interaction around insulin sensitizing nutrients and cell membrane sensitivity. So one of the ways you can enhance insulin sensitivity is by using a group of supplements called glucose disposal agents. So these are nutrients which would either sensitize the cell to insulin better, or actually work in an insulin mimicking type of effect. If you look at the interaction between alpha lipoic acid and creatine, alpha lipoic acid is probably one of the most powerful nutrients which will get things into the cell. When you combine alpha lipoic acid with creatine, you get a far better uptake of creatine into the cell. So there's quite a few of these GDAs that shortened for, which can help with insulin sensitivity, and also in terms of performance increases, you get more things in the cell quicker, so you can recover athletes better, you can load them on creatine quicker. It's one of my favorite nutrients, actually, alpha lipoic acid, although I've got quite a lot of favorite nutrients, to be fair. Here's a slide showing different effects which can influence muscle protein synthesis. So obvious, some of them are obvious. So protein balance, energy balance, but also the cellular hydration will increase it. Leucine, really important, glutamine, and then you need the stimulus via the exercise. So you need to be training intensively. You need to be doing stretch-aided hypertrophy as well. In terms of a hormonal profile, this is the type of hormones which will interact with muscle protein synthesis. So obviously, if you can optimize these naturally, then you're going to do well in terms of gaining muscle in a nice natural manner. Any questions based on that?
Okay, so we got a couple. Yelena's asking, have you ever used cordyceps for your athletes?
I love cordyceps.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the most powerful medicinal mushroom extracts. I mean, I know it's a fungi technically, but I think it works. I think it's a helpful nutrient. It can be good in a complex of other adaptogenic herbs. I think the adaptogens are probably one of the best natural ways to improve endocrine function, so hormonal function. I don't know how many people here take them, but you do feel almost an instant difference. I'll often stir a bit of Siberian ginseng into a coffee in the morning. I might use Korean ginseng pre-workout again in a coffee. So I'm a big fan of cordyceps. So some of these we might end on. How are we doing for time?
It's 5 to 7. So we normally run to the hour or just after, depending on questions. So Aisha's asking for BCAA supplements, what ratios do you recommend between the three aminos for the insulin resistant type? Also any brand recommendations? And also, what's your thoughts on taking BCAA supplements which also contain glutamine?
Well, there's a few things in there. The first thing is that actually, as long as you're consuming enough general protein, then all you really need to do is put the leucine in and not worry about the other branched chain aminos. BCAAs only work in the presence of all the other essential amino acids for muscle protein synthesis. It just so happens that normally people will have eaten a mixed meal with varied protein sources in and around the workout, so there will be other aminos present at the point at which they take the BCAAs. But really, if you wanted to be purist about it, then just taking the leucine on its own would be enough. I've used BCAAs. Having said that, I have used BCAAs on their own just because I know that I'm probably taking some essential aminos later on. But I think the best way to use aminos is an essential amino acid blend with a branched chain amino acid blend alongside it. Glutamine would be a useful addition to that type of a blend because it's good for gut health. It might help immune system function in athletes as well and normal individuals. Ratio wise, not sure. You just need the magic number, which is about 5 grams of leucine in order to trigger the muscle protein synthesis. Any less than that doesn't tend to do the job. So as long as you're getting 5 grams of leucine, I wouldn't worry too much about the others.
What's your opinion, Matt, on the topic that some researchers are coming out with now, saying that we don't need to supplement BCAAs if we're getting sufficient overall protein intake, including maybe taking a whey protein supplement?
Well, that would be pretty much exactly what I just said, because if you have sufficient protein and you have a whey protein, say 40 grams of whey protein, you'll get 5 grams of leucine. So as long as you get that 5 grams of leucine from any which way, you'll get the effect on muscle protein synthesis. So it's interesting. So yeah, so the BCAAs work because they got leucine in them, and also you can convert BCAAs into glucose. So sometimes you feel better when you take them because you're getting a lift in energy. So in some ways, it's not that they're a hypey supplement. They work because they got leucine in them, but you can get leucine from whey protein. So you can see in the supplement world and in this area, you always get you get spheres of research which just don't like the thought of taking too many supplements, and generally all the research will be negative. And then you'll get spheres of research which just say everything works and it's overly positive. But if you can boil it down to what is the mechanism by which branched chain amino acids may work, and it is the leucine trigger, that's all it is. But you'll get the leucine trigger from whey protein or from vegan protein enhanced with BCAAs. I've lent more towards an essential amino acid blend with BCAAs because generally I don't tolerate whey protein very well, and lots of people are sensitive to milk proteins, which would then rule out whey protein as an option for them. And up until recently, plant proteins weren't sufficiently high in leucine to get the desired effect, so you had to take additional leucine on top of it.
You know, what you've just said has clarified a lot for me. You know, I've edited the FSN magazine for 12 years and you get snippets of information on the protein powders. But yeah, you've clarified really nicely. Just the vegan proteins are low in the leucine. But also I've had a personal interest in, is there a context in which certain individuals will benefit more from single amino acid dosage as opposed to a whey protein, and you've answered that as well. I think a lot comes down to digestibility, how well you can break it down and assimilate it.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Okay. Anything else you want to share before we finish?
No, just to say thanks for listening, and do give us a follow, and my contact details are there, including my email. So if you want to email any additional questions, just do reach out. Be happy to try and help you. And thanks for coming along, and thanks for listening.
And thank you, Matt, for an excellent presentation. So Simone will share Matt's slides tomorrow, and we'll also upload the recording tomorrow as well. So thank you all for zooming in, and we'll see you again next month. So have a good summer in the meantime. Hopefully the weather's good.